You're watching Car Babble, and I want to talk about a really important thing for people that are thinking about buying a Tesla, because I'm fairly confident there's a lot of people are put off buying one because they think the insane amount of minimalism is just a bit too much. And what I mean by that is that almost all the controls in the car are controlled by this massive touchscreen and some fairly unfamiliar styled buttons. So I thought I'd tell you about my initial experiences of owning this car and how I found living with this type of control setup and the general ambience of such a minimalist interior. So if that sounds good, buckle up, let's get into it. So whatever you think of the interior design of a Tesla, you kind of have to take your hat off to the fact that Tesla actually had the balls to do things so drastically different and basically reimagine the design of the interior of cars. And when you look at it really, over the last few years, quite a lot of car manufacturers have definitely taken a lot of their design cues from Tesla. So they must be doing something right. First thing that people say when they get into my Tesla, when they've never been in one before, is always the same.
Oh my goodness, how do you drive with nothing in front of you?
Yeah, no cockpits.
There's no buttons.
Yeah, there's not many buttons. Yeah, certainly when I first got on a Tesla and I was reviewing the Tesla Model Y, I'll leave a link to that at the end of this video, I was like, whoa, I don't know if I could get used to that, but I definitely don't feel like that now. And every comment I've read from a Tesla owner, they say the same thing. I haven't found one person that's still going, oh my God, I really miss my cockpit. Nobody cares. And for me, the only thing I ever wanted was a speedo, a digital speedo, and you've still got it in the top right-hand corner or left, depending on your market, of your infotainment screen. So that's all I really wanted. I don't miss anything else. And so soon you kind of go, actually, do you know what? It's actually really quite nice having that extra bit of visibility there. It's just not an issue at all. And when you think about your eye line, it's not directly like straightforward, you know, but it's close enough to your eye line that you don't feel like you're really adjusting your eyes to see your speed. So it's not like you're going like that, you know, there's just no issue with adjusting your eyes slightly to do it. And so it still feels like it's in your field of vision. And that's why it just isn't a problem. But before we get on to the infotainment system, I want to talk about the steering wheel a bit. And I'm not here to give like a tutorial on how to actually use all the functions in the car. There's plenty of other people that will probably do videos like that, and you can read the Tesla manual as well. I really love the feeling softness of the steering wheel. I absolutely love holding it. Next to BMWs, it's probably the best one I've ever held, but it's quite cheap in terms of material. I can see it like really starting to look faded already, and it's warping at the sides, and that's a really common issue. This one's still under warranty, so I'm seriously thinking about going to Tesla and actually getting them to see if they can replace it under warranty. Because yeah, that will start to look really tatty, I think, quite quick. But in terms of the feel of it, I don't care if it's actually that quality of material, it does feel really nice in the hands, it's a nice thickness. But in terms of controls, there isn't many, but the ones that are there do quite a lot with just being for your thumbs essentially. You've got a little scroll wheel on each side and you can scroll up and down both sides, you can go left and right, and you can press it in as well. And all of that is great, except for the pressing to the side, which I briefly mentioned in my first video I made about this car when I first collected it. But I just find when you try to actually change track, it's like you really have to push it to the side. It's quite easy for it to accidentally push in or go up or down. And I just find, I don't know how you would address that without having more buttons on the steering wheel. Certainly in the newer Model 3 Highland, you do have more buttons on the steering wheel, but I don't really see how you can address that without having something else here. And I do love the minimalism of it, but I do find also it's just a little bit clunky and a bit, you have to really use quite a bit of force to press it in, more than I would like. Then there's the indicator stalks, which are familiar yet unfamiliar all at the same time. Well, you actually have them, which you don't in the Tesla Model 3 Highland, but they're slightly different, and in a kind of good way, I think, actually. The left one indicates left, up and down, and you also then press a button on the end to use your wiper once instead of pulling on your other indicator to use it as a lever, and then a long press does a wee scoosh your water. I'm like, that actually works quite well, I like that. And then the right one, it's a bit like in a Mercedes, you know, where you've got, instead of a gear stick, you have your indicators on the right being your gear stick, and that works great. And you get in the car, it's just like in the drive, and off you go. And then your button at the end is to park it. It's like, it's so easy to use that. And then when you're on the move, you can use it for your autonomous driving to go into adaptive cruise and pilot assist and all that. So I really like that system. One thing though is when I'm using autopilot to pull it down into adaptive cruise and so on, I find it a little bit stiff. It's almost a bit like I feel like I'm going to snap it off, and it could just be this car, but it is just a little bit like, I really have to yank that down, and it just doesn't feel particularly smooth. But outside of that, generally I just think the stalks attached to the wheel are ace. But you do need to adjust the speed of your windscreen wipers as well, and that's where things kind of go south a little bit, because all the functions are buried in the touchscreen initially. You can use voice control to change this, and you can also use your shortcut button, which you can do on your left scroll wheel, to actually make it your adjuster for that. And I use that quite a bit because I would otherwise rather just set up the auto wipers and let the rain sensing function work and never have to worry about it. But unfortunately, it's an absolute abomination in this car, and it's a well documented problem that they can't seem to fix with software updates. And so I can't rely on the auto wipers to actually match the actual amount of rain that's falling on them. So I do want to change the intermittency, if that's even a word, of the other settings quite a lot. And so doing it in the touchscreen, even though you can actually put your wiper settings in your shortcuts at the bottom, isn't ideal. So yeah, the thing I try to use the most is the shortcut on my scroll wheel, because I don't want to be talking to my car every 2 seconds when I want to change the speed of the wipers either. And about the voice control, you use this right scroll wheel and press it in to use it. And the key thing is that you get the commands right, and if you learn the commands, then you can use it to do quite a lot of things in the car. But yeah, it's like really using your memory to go, how do I say things in the right way that it understands it? And then obviously if you've got a thick Scottish accent as well, it might be going, who's this guy, you know? But it does work if you get it right. Like if I say open glove box, there you go, it did it. So it can serve a purpose, but for certain functions I don't want to use it. And about that shortcut button, I do find that really quite a useful thing, because you can decide on a few different options of what you use to actually control your scroll wheel by pressing it down and holding it. And yeah, I've cycled between the wipers and also the chill versus standard mode for driving, because again, you know, quickly when I burst the speed, then I just flick it in my steering wheel and boom, I'm going at light speed, you know, as opposed to flicking around in the computer. And so yeah, I like to use it for that, but sometimes when the weather's really bad, I'm like, okay, back to the wipers again. But that is a really good feature. But Tesla have been pretty bold with the amount of things they've buried in the touchscreen, like, you know, the glove box button. There's no lever. You either use the voice control or you press on the touchscreen. And yeah, that sounds a bit cool and gimmicky at first, and then you know, after a while, you're a bit like, yeah, I just want to reach over and pull a lever. And then things like the reach and rake of the steering wheel, that's in the touchscreen as well. But after a while, you kind of then go, but yeah, I don't actually use those things very much. And because there's so much space in the center console, I never use the glove box. I don't need it. I just don't need that much space. And so I'm not going in and out of it very often, and I don't often change my steering wheel settings. And once I've got my memory profile set up for my seat and my mirrors and everything, I don't touch that either. And you can change your profiles, so when my wife gets in, she can set hers up. So none of those things are like really regular things I need to go back into the touchscreen to do. And so they're just not a problem. Even the doors, you know, it's like, Tesla, are you just showing off now, you know? Well, how do we just make things as totally wacky as possible? I know, we'll just have a button press for the door instead of a lever. Oh, there is a backup lever, but you don't use it because it is just such a boss move to press the button and it opens for you and you get out, you know? But stuff like that, it's just done so differently, but actually so well when you think about it. But back to this touchscreen, and it's not just that this is the brains of the car, you know, it's a smartphone on wheels for sure, but it's the thing that makes the minimalist interior work so well, I think, because your attention's just totally drawn to it. But it's just such a good system, and it's like, where did Tesla come up with this? You know, it's like Microsoft have been at this stuff for years, and then Tesla rock up and they're like, guys. But this is maybe a bit cynical of me to say this and easily debunked, but I do worry that a bit like an Apple product, after a few years of having this, that more problems are going to creep in and you're going to start being like, oh, this doesn't really work that well anymore. And it's like, are they just trying to get me to go and buy the next car, you know? But I hope that's not the case, because if they don't and this continues to work and all the amazing software updates continue to keep coming and keeping it fresh, it is just hard to see how it can get that much better for what you really need. I lost my premium connectivity again because my bank details changed. I need to just update it and then pay for it again. But having Google Maps, you know, and just the whole interface and Spotify so well integrated, everything about it is just absolutely banging. and I really do love it. But I do still find some of the buttons can be a little bit unresponsive when you press them. And if you're sitting still and you press it, it's never a problem. But on the move, you do just have to be that bit more accurate. And sometimes you just can be when you're driving, particularly if you're on a dodgy road. And so sometimes I go to press a button, I'm like, I definitely pressed the right part of that button, nothing happens. Do it again, and eventually it works. It's like, oh, I'm just more time spent looking at that and not at the road, and that is totally distracting. There has been a few moments where I've gone, genuinely, I feel like this is more distracting than if I was actually using my mobile phone while I was driving. You know, if I was like this, at least it would be in my eye line, you know, and I just really do feel sometimes like I am really too distracted using this infotainment system. And yeah, the buttons are big in most cases, but they just sometimes need more presses, and sometimes you've just got to go through a lot of menus to get to what you want. And so no matter how good a touchscreen ever is, I'm never going to say it's 100% awesome, because there are still things about it that frustrate me, and it's dangerous. One thing I have also found is a lot of the button presses are on icons that are around the outside of the screen, like your shortcuts on the bottom or your menu down the left side. And so a lot of the time, if you hold the back of it and use your thumb, you're much more accurate and have way less problems with getting it to function first time, every time when I do that. But there are still buttons in the middle of the screen, and yeah, they're big, but there is just a lot of times where I'm like, that just did not work when I pressed it. When it comes to purely responsiveness of touch, this is not the best touchscreen I've ever used. I would say that's the BMW iDrive 7. And the buttons on that aren't as big, so you will have other issues with occasionally, like, you know, needing a surgeon's touch to actually get to the button. But I think when you do tap it, it's better at responding even more than this. And there's certain buttons on this one, like the Your Library button in my Spotify. For some reason, that button, quite often when I go to press it, it just doesn't do anything. And I'm like, ugh, you know, and so it's got flaws, but overall, it's still a really good touchscreen. Setting up your favorites that you can have icons for along the bottom is definitely a useful feature, because there's so many things you're not going to use very often. And so I do like that. And again, you think compared to a car where you've got loads of buttons, it's like, that's your buttons. You can never change them, can you? You know? So that definitely is a real advantage of a touchscreen. And yeah, because they're on the bottom, I can just easily put my fingers under the back and just use my thumb. And yeah, it's really good for that. But overall, they're still quite small. And so you still need to really look at them properly when you're driving, and it is just another look away from the road, and they all add up. But my biggest gripe in this car, without a doubt, is the two safety systems that I like to switch off every time I get in the car, because I don't like lane departure avoidance warnings, and I also don't like forward collision warning. And the amount of times I go out of my village and it thinks I'm going to have a crash into a hedge that I'm actually just turning past is really, really, really annoying. So I just want to switch them off. So what does that involve? Well, first of all, you have to press the bottom right of the screen, then you have to press autopilot, then you have to scroll down, so swipey up, and then you have to go to forward collision warning, off. Then you have to go to lane departure avoidance, uncheck that. Do you want to disable it? Yes, I bloody do. Press another button. That is a lot of distraction, which you are most likely going to be making on the move, because if you're like me, you forget to do it before you actually take off, which is what I'm trying to train my brain to do. But that is a lot of distractions, and I really, really hate that. But unfortunately, most cars now, you have a similar sort of hassle to be able to turn these systems off. And it sucks. Another gripe, and it's one that I can't gripe too much about, because I knew that the air conditioning controls were buried in the touchscreen when I bought this car, and I'm okay with that. You know, you press on the bit on your screen and it comes up with your whole dash as a digital view, and then you can change all the buttons. I'm fine with all of that. The only thing I don't like is directing the direction of my fans, and I just find it really quite difficult to get the right direction I want, where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm getting a good blast of air or whatever. It's just overly designed, you know. I'm like, yeah, it looks really cool and minimalist and all that again, but in this case, I just want to look at my fan and go, oh yeah, I want to just point that right there, and you can't do that. So what's my overall feeling about the usability of this whole system so far? It's not perfect, but it's mostly a positive experience, and there are a lot of things about it that were initially ones I was skeptical about and I thought were a bit wacky and a bit gimmicky, and then I've kind of over time gone, that actually is better. And yeah, it really makes quite a bit of sense. So there is a lot of good things going on here, and I do like the design and the minimalist interior view and everything about that, visibility, all that stuff. It looks great. But the touchscreen part definitely still isn't perfect. But something I am really trying to get in the habit of doing is having a sort of like pre-launch procedure before I go and off in the car. And that means turning off some of the systems I hate that, you know, avoid me getting this annoying chime like I'm about to have a crash and makes me think I'm about to get ejected out of the car. Or setting up my music or something, you know, so that my playlists are there and I'm good to go and everything's in place, you know. All those sort of things, if I can do it before I drive off, technically I'll be safer for doing it and I'll have way less button presses to worry about once I'm on the move. But in the real world and the way I live my life, I'm always in a rush, and it's like you forget to do a lot of that stuff quite a lot of the time. And so you're always still going to have to go to the touchscreen. You just are. And something else that pays homage to having some buttons or a wee scroll wheel, you know, that would really fix a lot of my gripes. I've had a wee scroll wheel, I don't need loads of shortcut buttons, just give me a wee scroll wheel, wee joystick, that would be amazing, and that wouldn't really damage the minimalist interior that much. But see, when I was on holiday for nearly 2 weeks and I came back, I did have that brief moment where I went to do a couple of things and I went, ugh, how do I do that again? And, you know, eventually I found what I was looking for, but it was like, I don't think the muscle memory is as good at staying with you when it comes to touchscreen functions as actual buttons. And so again, it's just another reason why having buttons will always be better in certain ways. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed the video and it was useful, and I still feel like a bit of a Tesla newbie, and there's been a lot of really useful comments I got from people about how to operate my car. So feel free to keep them coming. I'll humbly accept if I get anything wrong or if I miss a bit of information out, but I'd love to know your thoughts about this video and your experiences of getting used to your Tesla and all the controls and stuff like that as well. But if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like as well, and also subscribe if you want to see more about this car, because I'm going to talk about loads of things to do with this car and other cars as well. I'm just getting started. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.